Welcome again to another episode of Good Viral. We are so excited to have our new guest, Daniel. Daniel, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks very much for having me. It's great to be here.
So, the first thing is, what is it that sparked your mission or idea for you? What was it that started it for you? But I wanted to also for you to clarify for us, what is it that you really do? What are you up to? What's the work that you do?
Absolutely. And I'll actually answer both with just a little story. I think it'll summarize it and put context to the whole thing. So I started Sustainability Champions about 3 years ago. This was early or in January 2019. And really the thought process behind it is that the environment, or rather the media, the way the media talks about the environment is typically extremely negative. It's a lot of doom and gloom. And there's just a lot of really, negativity about climate change, plastic in the ocean. I mean, there's just so many different topics. And I think that when people are constantly bombarded with this type of negativity, what ends up happening is one of two things. Either people get really overwhelmed and they feel like, this is way beyond their control, and it just, eco anxiety sets in. Like you're just like super anxious, or even depression sets in, and it's just an awful place to be. Or the other extreme is apathy sets in, and you're just like, I don't care at all. This is way too complicated for me to deal with. I'm just going to keep watching my TikTok videos and move on with my life. Neither one of those are very helpful in actually addressing the issues that we're facing when it comes to all of these environmental challenges. And so what Sustainability Champions is all about is actually highlighting, it's a media channel that highlights people who are seeing these challenges that everyone else is seeing and choosing to take action, no matter how big or small. And so that's what Sustainability Champions does, is we show that actually there are people who are doing something, and they really are making progress, with the idea that basically it should hopefully inspire and motivate our audience to also take action, or at the very least to make people feel that things aren't as bad as they seem, because it's otherwise a very one-sided situation where you're only seeing this negativity. So that's basically the premise of what we do, is to showcase that things are happening and that you can and should, and I think actually must, get involved. And that you don't need to invent this whole new type of technology that creates electricity from, I don't know, some crazy thing that never existed before. Sometimes it's just organizing a beach cleanup, or just doing it on your own. And all of these actions make a difference.
I find this really interesting and a fantastic idea, and awesome podcast and YouTube channel that I've been following now. And so all of our listeners, go check that out. We kind of have some crossover in terms of just basically the subject matter of who we talk to, right? And so what I think is interesting is a lot of our guests that we've brought in, and many similar guests to you, I would imagine, kind of say the same thing in terms of there's all this doom and gloom out there. But I think it was Milky Wire, Nina, who's the founder of Milky Wire, she said, everyone's always talking about the doom and gloom, but we wanted to bring a little bit of light to the tunnel and show that we can create change. And so it's interesting that all these people are on the ground floor and they're just seeing the muck of it, but they're always going, but we can still change things. And that's really why they're there, right? They can see the change, and that's why they're doing the change. So I really want to just kind of give you huge kudos to really showcasing all those people in the muck, really, to help people also get a little bit more involved in the muck, or be in the muck themselves. So that's really cool.
Thank you.
So I know that you have the podcast, and you've got the video, the YouTube channel, the website, and so on. So, in terms of this journey of really showcasing and highlighting all these people who are creating environmental impacts, were there things that changed, or you had to completely switch gears that you're along this journey because you're finding that this might be a better way, or this just isn't working out?
Yeah. So we originally, when I started the podcast, and I guess this is more of a kind of the business approach, or the business thinking behind everything. When we started the podcast, I also wanted to get onto social media in order to talk about the podcast. And ultimately, the podcast is where I began. I really wanted to learn directly from people who are, as you said, in the muck, and who are actually doing the work. And because I personally get really inspired by other entrepreneurs and visionary individuals, and I just thought, podcast, what a great opportunity. So the Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all of these things were really important tools to get up and running. And there are two kind of things to this. Number one is it took us a while to figure out what type of content we actually wanted to publish, because we didn't really understand exactly what our audience wanted to see on social media. So that took about 6 months of just trial and error, every day testing out new ideas, new posts, etc. And after about 6 months, we actually cracked the code of our sort of style and our template that we now use. And so if we fast forward about 1.5 to 2 years, it's actually about 1.5 years, we now have 115,000 followers on Instagram because we were able to figure out what works for us. So that was one thing, just constant testing. Another thing where I chose to pivot is I've actually stopped recording podcast episodes directly, like the standard type of podcasts on like Spotify and, that you publish on all the podcast apps, because what I found personally for our audience is that people really enjoy the live conversations instead. And so I started doing more Instagram lives and YouTube, or sorry, not YouTube, LinkedIn, actually it's on YouTube as well, live conversations where people can actually tune in and watch and ask questions directly and comment. And I just personally, I find it much more fun because it's live. So there's no redos or do-overs or editing, which also takes extra time, but it's a much more sort of, it feels more natural in that sense. And it also feels, I think for the audience, like a great way to really get an opportunity to speak to someone that they may also admire or be interested in or want to learn from. And you don't really get that opportunity, not to the same degree, at least, on a regular recorded podcast that's published every week or whatever the schedule is. So those are a couple of examples. Another one, although this isn't something historical and wasn't a pivot that I made previously, but it's really interesting to see that as things progress and as you grow the business, you continue to get new ideas on what you want to do next. And sometimes you start with no clear direction, at least this was my case. I really just wanted to get this podcast to just showcase people who are doing great things. And as we kept going with it, there's all these new ideas that come up and all these new opportunities. And I think, wow, here's an even better way to get that message out there, or here's another way that we can do it that has, it's a whole new channel, a whole new medium, and hopefully a whole new audience as well that we can access. So it's, running a business is certainly not a static thing. And I think the most important thing is to be extremely flexible and also very honest, because if you're neither flexible nor honest with yourself, you'll end up potentially just doing the same thing without ever considering that actually it may not be working anymore, or there's a better way to do it.
So what is it that you're up to these days that's giving you maybe the most satisfaction, or that you're the most excited about?
So I think what I'm working on now, which is I'm really, really excited about, is moving into video production more seriously. We are actually going to publish our very first one on Friday, the 15th of October, which is Global Hand Washing Day. Fun fact. And so we're going to be publishing a video about a sustainability champion who is involved with that. Yeah, I think audio is fantastic. People love podcasts. It's great to be involved with or listen to a podcast when you're on the go. Social media, at least like Instagram and Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and TikTok. These are all much more sort of like on the go kind of thing. You can chill and go through that, but it's also easy to consume. But I think what's really cool about videos, it's even if it's short, it really absorbs you fully, or a good video does. And I've watched documentaries in the past where I just think I'm going to change my entire life around this one topic because of this information that I saw. And video is just such a powerful medium for communication. And so that for me is something I'm really, really interested in and I'm really excited about. And I think, with video, when it's done correctly, you can really inspire and motivate people from all over. And you don't really need the language either, because at least if it's done correctly, as in, it's going to be in English, but people who don't speak English can also appreciate when it's done right, these videos can be, you don't really need the language that much to understand what's going on. So that's something that I'm really interested in and excited about right now specifically. I have a bunch of other ideas that are floating around that I'm hoping to get started on, but one thing I've learned is one step at a time. So for me, immediately in the short term, I'm really excited about video, and I want this to be the next kind of thing that we master.
That's awesome. And, I
Right.
think there's a lot to what you just said there with video creating such impact individually in people's lives. So like Demian here, he was telling me all about Game Changers. You got to watch this documentary, Game Changers.
That's the
And
one I was talking about. Yeah.
yeah. And so I watched it as well. And of course that changed some of my habits. And Seaspiracy was another one for me, especially. So all of these different documentaries definitely hit home. So we're really glad that you're diving more into video as it is the number one way to market yourself, for one, and it is the number one way people prefer to receive information. So I think that's great that you're expanding yourself into those areas. So when it comes to people who are listening to this podcast or watching the video, what would you suggest to them is the 1 to 2 ways that they can get more involved with your mission and or what your vision is?
It's a really cool question. My mission and the vision, I suppose, of Sustainability Champions, well, the mission of Sustainability Champions is really just to share, I suppose, positive stories and inspirational people who are taking action. The way to get involved with that is to, first of all, start where you are. You don't need to be already, I don't know, super successful, whatever people think is an ideal person who can make a change. And everyone has their own sort of ideal vision in their mind or picture of what that looks like. But you don't need to be that person. You are you because, well, you're you, and you're perfect as you are because that's how you are. So I think the important thing is to start there and really take a look around you and see what changes you can make. And again, they don't need to be big, because that's one thing I've learned is sometimes once you start taking that little step forward and you take the second step and the third and so on, all of a sudden bigger and bigger, you can do more and more. That's number one. Just take a look around, see what you can do, see what changes you can make. Compost if you can. Like, these are there's just so many tiny little things you can do, and I won't spend half an hour listing, because there's lots of listicle blogs that can do that. But another one, and this is, I think, where people sometimes forget how much power they truly have in order to enact change to benefit the environment, is how they spend money. Because companies, which is where most of the challenges that we're facing are coming from, whether it's climate change, polluted water, the way food and agriculture is done, plastic in the ocean. This is all typically boils down to business. And so there are a lot of people who are solving these issues, but at the same time, we as individuals, every single time we pay someone, we are voting and saying, this is what I want, and please make more of this. And so every single time you make a decision to, swipe your credit card at a store, for instance, where they don't use any single-use plastic, that's a vote of confidence for that store. And it's doing two things. Number one, you're telling that store, yes, awesome, please keep going. I love what you're doing. I support you. What you're also doing is taking money away from the stores that do use single-use plastic. Granted, one person doing that, and if no one else in the world changes, it's not going to do a lot. I get that. But at the same time, everyone is an individual. And when you have hundreds of millions of people all making that change, and they're all individuals making that change, then massive change does happen. And so I really encourage you, where and when you can, to, don't go broke or bankrupt doing this, because you have to support yourself first. But when and where possible, see where you can make those changes in the way you spend money, because it really does make a huge difference when we all get involved. And I suppose the final point of this, and this is really the point of Sustainability Champions, is once you start doing all of these little things, those two previous points, it's a ripple effect. Other people will see what you're doing, and you may not even realize that you're affecting someone else. But you walk in, the example I always give is you walk into a grocery store with a reusable bag, and you're just doing, you're just doing your grocery shopping, doing your thing. And you may not realize that actually across the aisle, someone sees your reusable bag and says, oh, that's right, I need to do that. And that's a reminder for them. And they start making that change. And that ripple effect just keeps going and going and going. And you may not even know about it. You may never find out. But these actions are seen by other people as well. That's why I think even the smallest actions make a big difference.
I love how succinct, sorry, I don't know if I said that well, succinct you are in your answers, because you're expressing a lot of the things that we always talk about, that we know are true, but in the way that you're doing it, it's very, very clear. And you remind me of the idea, about, when we talk about spending money and where we spend our money and the choices that we make with our money. Most people are making decisions about buying things based more than anything on cost. Of course, what we see is we see like this dollar figure. What we don't see is what it's costing us behind that, right? And so, it, like you say, if you're voting for something literally that supports the ideas that you believe in, then you're actually gaining by voting for that, by spending your money there. And if you're voting for something by spending your money for something that's against what you're all about, then you are paying more. And they're just, what they are is they're literally hidden costs. That's a powerful message, is that, and also I love what you said. I'm repeating because I'm inspired by what you're saying, and I want to make sure that this message is clear in this podcast, is that I've noticed it in a huge way. I've made some recent changes in my life, and it's like those changes, those little small things that I've done, because they became more important for me, they started coming out more in my language. And so, in other words, in the normal sentences that I'm saying, in the normal situations that I'm using them, I'm saying things slightly differently. And so people are getting a little bit of a different message. And because they're getting a little bit of a different message, that's impacting them differently. I don't know if you know about us, but I'm in Barcelona, and Anastasia's in Denver, Colorado. And here in Barcelona, I teach Kung Fu. And one thing that my students come to me all the time, it's very interesting. They'll say, yeah, when you told me such and such, when you were talking about this, it really had a big impact on me, and this has changed in my life. And it's like, oh my God, when I said that, I didn't even think that was going to be really very important, because I was just simply sharing what it is that was on my mind at that time. But the reality is that doesn't just happen to Kung Fu instructors. That happens to everybody. Literally everybody that we're in contact with, having conversations with, all the time throughout the day. And not only our conversations, but our interactions, right? So in other words, we're in traffic. If I do a kind gesture to another driver, that person is maybe going to be impacted to do a kind gesture for another driver. So we're constantly sharing our ideals in ways that are impacting other people, and we don't even realize it.
Just on that point, it's so true. The kindness ripple effect goes way beyond just one gesture. I don't remember if this was a real study or if I heard this somewhere, and this is not going to be an accurate portrayal of what I read, but it was this idea of like, if you open the door for someone, you hold the door open, then it goes like the next person will hold the door open for the next person, and it just keeps going and going and going. And sometimes it just lasts for a really long time, whereas you may be the first one to do that, and all of a sudden you've completely changed the line. Yeah, one good action like that, one kind action that you do, can have such an incredible ripple effect in ways that you will never ever know. It's impossible to know. I think kindness is really important, and I think the same thing with, if we're going to go back to the environmental aspect, it's so important. You don't always see, you spoke about hidden costs, but I think there's also like, hidden knock-on effects. You don't see probably 99% of them, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it, because also it will come back to you in some other way.
This kind of reminds me of in at least here in the States, when we have all these drive-throughs, right, with all the restaurants and coffee shops and so on, is that person who decides, hey, I'll pay for mine and for the person's coffee behind me, right?
Exactly.
And so as the line keeps going forward, everyone's just like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. And so they'll buy the person behind them. And I don't know what the record is so far, but I know that one coffee shop or restaurant was in the hundreds when it came to how many cars were going by and paying for the person behind them. And it all comes from
That's so
like
cool.
that. Yeah, it all comes from that one act of in kindness in a way, and just wanting to spread the love a little bit. It's also the same when it comes to the environment and sustainability. It's just spreading the love together. And this idea of almost like the hive working together. It's the single bee cannot feed the entire hive, but the entire hive can feed everyone, and then the people who want the honey. So when it comes to kind of like where you're moving forward next with these videos and so on and so forth, like what's the overall vision in terms of how people are getting involved with your content? Like, we have these grand romantic, ideas of where we're wanting to take these things. And then there comes the practicality of that. And maybe it's not quite as grandeur, or sometimes it can be. So I'm just kind of curious when it comes to this new phase with the video and the basically film, what is kind of your vision in terms of the impact and the following and the people kind of doing those acts of kindness and repetition?
I suppose the ultimate vision is, to build this to a point where we can really inspire hundreds of millions of people around the world. I think when it comes to anything environmental, and especially considering the scope of the challenge that we face, I don't think the word practical is really one that a word that we should use, because if we're too practical and sort of saying, well, let's do very slow incremental growth, although these things are important, I think the word practical is it's going to be it'll just slow us down a little bit. And I think we need to kind of go break past that practicality barrier of, don't think so big, be practical. I just don't think we have time or sort of the space for it right now. And so as part of that thinking, I'm choosing to also not be practical, because the role that I see sustainability champions playing is technically we're not creating any products. We're not on the ground cleaning up plastic. I mean, we can do that, but that's not ultimately what Sustainability Champions is. We are a media channel and we spread a message. That's what we do. So, and the point of the message is to actually inspire others to take that action. And I get inspired to take action all the time as a result of the work that we're doing. So for me, I mean, if we can inspire like 100 million people to take action, then, the way I see that ripple effect, it's going to be huge. Because again, if we think about the record of coffee shop people is like hundreds, if we can inspire 100 million people, then that might ripple to, I don't know, 1 billion people. It's harder to know. But I think that's ultimately what I'm looking to do. And in order to do that, we need to get involved in as many different media as possible. So video, audio, still images, events, so that people can actually participate and learn from each other. I certainly don't know all the answers. I barely know any answers. So we need to get as many people together as possible to get involved. And yeah, the vision is really just the more, I suppose, the merrier would be one way to say it. But, it's a really big, we're facing some really big challenges. And if you look at them as opportunities, there are huge opportunities that require a lot of teamwork. And so the more people who see that they actually have a place and can be involved and can help, then I think the faster and more effectively we can actually solve these challenges.
Now, you mentioned, you said this Friday, which I think is, well, for me, that would be tomorrow, right?
Yes.
So you've got your video that you're releasing. So, of course, we want our listeners, we want everybody that we can we can reach to know about that, how to get to it, how to see it. So, but then the question goes beyond that. So not only how do they see your video, but also what are some ways that you can, that people, that our listeners and that people can support you, your cause, and be involved right now?
So the answer to both of those questions in terms of how to get involved, how to support the cause, and how to see the video are actually going to be all the same. And that's to check out Sustainability Champions. So most of our biggest following is on Instagram. So if you just go to @Sustainability Champions, you'll find us there. We're also on Facebook and LinkedIn, also on YouTube, Sustainability Champions. So we're going to be publishing this video everywhere. And it's also going to be our first foray onto TikTok. So again, Sustainability Champions on TikTok. So I'm looking forward to to getting involved on TikTok. I've watched enough dancing videos already, so I'm ready to
dance
put out something
yourself a
else.
little bit.
I haven't done it yet. Yeah, I'm not brave enough. But yeah, I mean, I think it's awesome that, that's what's so cool about social media, is that it's really democratizing the ability for anyone to showcase their talents. I mean, you have people from all over the world, amazing dancers and, magicians, or people who just like create little funny videos. All of a sudden they have this ability to share their thoughts. And it's really cool because, I mean, the amount of content that's being created, I don't remember the stats, but like on YouTube, every second, the number of hours or days or weeks or even years of content that's being uploaded is just incredible. And it also means that there's something for everyone. And it's really cool. I mean, anyone can start a podcast, anyone can get onto social media and share their message and their thoughts.
Thank you so much for being part of Good Viral and giving us such amazing ideas and influence and inspiration to our listeners here today. Everyone who's listening, please go to all of the social media that you just listened to from Daniel and follow so you can see the film when it drops. So thank you so much for being on the podcast, Daniel, and everyone, seeing you on the next podcast.